Hey scholars, it's Miss Marnon with your second lesson of Unit 6. So we're going to review some one-step equations. So this is something that you did in 6th grade, and we're going to build on it in 7th grade. So our objective today is I can solve one-step equations for a missing variable. So first we have our review question, is n equals -3 a solution to the equation 2n plus 5 equals -1? So pause the video and check to see if n equals -3 is a solution to the equation. Okay, so hopefully you've already tried. So what we need to do is we need to see if when we substitute n, so -3 in for n, if we make this equation true. So it's going to be true if both sides are the same. So we're going to substitute -3 for n for this expression on the left-hand side. So 2 times -3 is -6 plus 5 is -1. So that means this side is -1 and this side is -1. So n equals -3 is a solution. For our preview question, what was the equation we used to help us solve percent problems? So pause the video and write that equation down right here. Okay, if you need help remembering, we did quantity equals percent times whole. And what happened a lot of the time is we were finding the quantity, but sometimes when we needed to find the percent or the whole, what we needed to do is divide on both sides to solve. So for example, sometimes there were 20 students that loved the museum. If there were 10% of students loved the museum, how many students altogether, the whole, went on the field trip, right? So 20% loved it. It's 10% of all the students that went on the trip, but we don't know how many whole students were on that trip. So what we ended up doing is we were divide by 10% on both sides. And then we were left with what x equaled how many students went on that trip. And in this case, it's 200. So let's do some notes to review our one-step equations. So blank equations involves finding the value or values that make an equation blank. So this one is solving equations. Oops, my pen's being weird. Involves finding the value or values that make an equation true. So we talked about what makes an equation true yesterday in the last lesson. So now today we're going to be talking about solving an equation to figure out what values make it true, which ones are the solutions. So last year we did learn how to solve a one-step equation, and we reviewed it a bit in our percents unit. So exercise 1, solve each of the following one-step equations by reversing what has been done to the variable. What we mean by reversing is we want to do the opposite. So we have two sets of opposites, right? We have adding and subtracting. And then we also have multiplication and division. So when they're adding, we need to subtract. When they're multiplying, we need to divide, and vice versa. So in part A here, we have x plus 8. Our goal is to get x alone so we can figure out what value of x will make the solution true. So we're going to do the opposite. So first I'm going to kind of split this in half. So if I subtract 8 on this side, when it was an equation and it was equal and balanced, we need to do the same thing on this side. So here's what's going to happen is this plus 8 and this -8, they are additive inverses, so they zero out. 12 minus 8 leaves us with 4 on this side. So all we're left with is x equals 4. So when we think about this x plus 8, it's kind of like we're wrapping up a present. So we took the present, the x, and then we added 8. That's like the wrapping paper. If we want to get back to just that present, we got to do the opposite and take the wrapping paper off. So let's look at part B. Why don't you try part B by yourself and see if you can figure it out? Okay, so for part B, I'm going to split it from the equal sign down. Here we have -2, so we want to do the opposite of minus. So we're going to do plus, and 2 is the number we're trying to get rid of. If I make a change on one side, I need to make the same change on the other side. So now 23 plus 2 is 25. -2 and plus 2 zero out. We're left with just n equals 25. So 25 is the solution to this equation when n equals 25. Let's look at this next one. 5y equals 55. We know that when we don't have something written between a number and a variable, it's multiplication. So when we have multiplication here, just like what we did in our percents unit, we need to do the opposite of multiplication to get rid of that number. We need to divide. So I'm going to divide by 5 on both sides. 5 divided by 5 is just 1, and then 1 times y will leave us with just y on the left. 55 divided by 5 leaves us with 11 on the right. So y equals 11 is a solution to this equation. And you can always test it back out. So we can take this 11, multiply it by 5. Is it 55? Yeah, so that's a value that will make it true. Last one for exercise 1, we have w divided by 3 equals 7. These ones seem to throw people for a loop a lot, but if this is dividing by 3, we need to do the opposite, which is multiplying by 3. And we're going to do it on both sides. Just like here, where we had like a 5 divided by 5, now we have a 3 divided by 3, which is 1 times w, which will leave us with just w. And 7 times 3 is 21. So the solution to this equation is w equals 21. For each of these examples, we are using what we call a property of equality. So these properties of equality, there's one for addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. All it means is that if I do the same thing on both sides, so if I add 4 on both sides, it stays the same. If I subtract 3 on both sides, it stays the same. If I divide by 4 or multiply by 10, it stays the same, as long as it's on both sides. Those are properties of equality. So for exercise 2, consider the following true equation. So we know 12 equals 12. But now it's saying, okay, so now try these things. So try adding 3 to both sides. So if I have 12 equals 12, now I'm going to add 3 to both sides. We have 15 equals 15. Is it still true? Yes. So try parts B, C, and D on your own. I think you'll see that these go pretty quick and are pretty easy. Okay, so for part B, subtract 8 from both sides. So we start with our 12 equals 12. We're going to subtract 8 on both sides. 12 minus 8 and 12 minus 8. We get 4 on the left and 4 on the right. Is it still true? Yes. Part C, multiply both sides by 2. So if we have 12 equals 12, we're going to multiply by 2 on both sides. 12 times 2 is 24, and 12 times 2 is 24. Is it still true? Yes. Last one, divide both sides by 3. So we start with 12 equals 12. We're dividing by 3 on both sides. We get 4 equals 4. Is it still true? Yes. So here we can see when you start with something that's equal, you can add, you can subtract, you can multiply, you can divide. As long as it's the same number on both sides and you start with a true equation, it's still true. So that's our property of equality, that we can add, subtract, multiply, and divide on both sides of an equation, and it will still be true as long as it's the same number. I can't add 2 on one side and 3 on the other and expect it to be true. It has to be the same number. So maybe let's put that little in there on our notes. Okay, exercise 3. Use the properties of equality to solve each of these one-step equations. So pause the video and try these on your own first. So try parts A, B, C, and D. Okay, so hopefully you went through and you tried some of these problems on your own. So I always like to draw a line from the equal sign down so I see my 2 sides of the equation. This is 8 times x, so we need to do the opposite. We're going to divide by 8 on both sides. 8 divided by 8 is going to go away. We're left with x equals 72 divided by 8 is 9. For part B, start with the equal sign, draw the line. So I got my 2 sides. We have n plus 10. I need to do the opposite, so I'm going to subtract 10. If I do it to one side, I need to do it to the other. We're left with n equals -7. Part C, we have x divided by 9, so I need to do the opposite, which is times 9. 9 divided by 9, it's going to 1 out, go away. We're left with x equals -5 times 9, -45. Next one, we have y minus 10 equals -4. So let's add 10 to both sides. These 0 out, we're left with y equals 6. So that's it for our notes. So you have some practice problems. So you have this first one, which is multiple choice. What's the property he's using? And then you have number 2, you have a couple one-step equations. And then number 3, you have more one-step equations, but now they look harder because they have fractions. But we can use our calculator. Fractions are just numbers. We don't need to be worried about them. And then we have our exit ticket, solve the equation. And then what does your solution mean? So what does it mean when you solve it and you get to the end? When you're done with your practice and your exit ticket, make sure you're going back to Canvas and completing one activity from the choice board for today.